The night Dominic came home smelling like someone else's perfume. Floral, expensive, nothing I'd ever own. He had the audacity to kiss me on the cheek and ask what was for dinner. I stood at the kitchen counter slicing tomatoes and said, "Pasta." He said, "Perfect," and walked upstairs to shower. I kept slicing. That was a Tuesday in March. Our daughter Wren was 14 months old, asleep in her crib down the hall. I had spent the entire day doing what I always did. Feeding her, holding her, singing to her, putting her down, picking her back up, answering work emails one-handed while she nursed, folding laundry at 11 at night. And somewhere on the other side of the city, my husband had been spending his afternoon with a woman named Chelsea. I didn't know her name yet, not that night. But I knew the perfume wasn't mine. Here's what people never understand about discovering infidelity. It rarely arrives like a lightning bolt. It creeps in. It's a Tuesday. It's a shower taken too quickly. It's a phone placed face down on every surface in the house. It's a husband who stops asking how your day was and starts asking about dinner instead. Because dinner is safer, dinner requires nothing. I'd been a corporate paralegal for 6 years. I understood documentation. I understood timelines. And without ever consciously deciding to, I had started building one. His name was Dominic Hale, 38 years old. Regional sales director for a pharmaceutical distribution company, which meant he traveled regularly, which meant he had cover that was clean and easy and had been handed to him by circumstance. We had been married for 4 years. I was 31. We owned a house in Charlotte, North Carolina. A 4-bedroom colonial on a quiet street with oak trees and a homeowners association that sent passive-aggressive letters about lawn maintenance. We had a joint checking account, a joint savings account, and a mortgage in both our names. We also had a prenuptial agreement. That part matters. Keep that in mind. I'd asked for the prenup before we married. My mother had spent 22 years married to a man who left her with nothing when he walked out. And I watched her rebuild from 44 years old with 2 kids and a part-time job at a dentist's office. I swore I would never be in that position. Dominic had laughed when I brought it up, not meanly, just the way men laugh when they think you're being dramatic. But he signed it. His lawyer reviewed it. Mine reviewed it. It was legal, binding and thorough. What Dominic had apparently forgotten, in the years since signing it, was exactly what it said. I had not forgotten. The full picture came together over about 6 weeks. I wasn't sloppy about it. I didn't go through his phone while he slept, though I could have. I didn't hire anyone. I simply paid attention, the way women learn to pay attention when the alternative is being blindsided. I noticed the pattern. Every other Thursday he came home later than his calendar indicated. His location sharing, which he'd turned on voluntarily, cheerfully, when Wren was born so I could always find him in an emergency, placed him at a hotel on the south side of Charlotte for approximately 3 hours each time. The Meridian Suites. I looked it up. Nice place. Complimentary valet. I also noticed that he had opened a credit card I didn't know about. I found the statement by accident when I was sorting through a pile of mail he'd left on his desk. The charges told their own story. Restaurants I'd never been to, a jewelry store in South Park, the Meridian Suites appearing with quiet regularity on the billing cycle. I took photographs of the statement on my phone. I put it back exactly where I found it. Then I called my attorney. Her name is Priscilla Tate, and she had drafted our prenuptial agreement. She is 53 years old, keeps a coffee mug on her desk that reads "Nevertheless." She persisted, and she has the kind of measured calm that makes you feel like everything is going to be okay even when it absolutely is not. I sat in her office on a Wednesday morning while Wren was at my mother's house, and I laid out what I had. Priscilla listened. She asked 4 questions. Then she said, "The prenup has an infidelity clause." I said, "I know." She said, "You documented everything?" I said, "I'm a paralegal." She almost smiled. The infidelity clause in our prenuptial agreement was my mother's idea, actually. She'd suggested it the way she suggested everything practical. Quietly, without drama over coffee at her kitchen table. Put it in writing that if he cheats, he walks away with less. Priscilla had advised something more specific. A financial penalty structure tied to documented infidelity, which meant that if I could prove what I suspected, the asset division in any divorce filing would shift significantly in my favor. Dominic had a 401(k), a stock portfolio, a company car, and a performance bonus structure that averaged around $40,000 a year on top of his base salary. We had the house, which had appreciated considerably since we bought it 3 years ago. Under normal divorce proceedings in North Carolina, we'd likely divide marital assets roughly equally. Under our prenup, with a documented infidelity clause triggered, I would receive the house outright, 60% of the marital investment accounts, and a lump sum payment. He would receive his personal 401(k), his car, and his clothes. I spent 3 weeks making sure every document was in order. Birth certificate for Wren, her pediatric records, My employment records. Every financial account statement I had access to. I moved my personal savings. Money I had contributed to our joint account from my own paycheck over 4 years documented to the penny. Into a separate account in my name only, which Priscilla confirmed I had full legal right to do. I also started quietly looking at apartments. I found one in Plaza Midwood, 10 minutes from my mother. 2 bedrooms, hardwood floors, a small yard with a fence where Ren could play. The landlord was a retired schoolteacher named Mr. Beaumont, who said the previous tenant had been there for 8 years and left only because she'd bought a house. I told him I was interested. I told him I'd be in touch within a few weeks. He said, "Take your time." I appreciated that. The Thursday I chose was a specific one, the first Thursday of April, which was also the anniversary of the day Dominic and I got engaged. He wouldn't remember that. He hadn't remembered it in 2 years. I'm not sure why I chose it. Maybe because I'm human. And sometimes symbolism matters even when it shouldn't. I knew from his location history that he'd be gone until at least 7:30. My mother arrived at the house at 2 in the afternoon. She didn't ask questions. She had come the way she always came when I needed her. Quietly, with food, with a look on her face that said she had suspected something for a while and was relieved we were finally moving. She bundled Ren into her car seat, loaded the diaper bag I'd packed, tucked the overnight bag I'd prepared into the trunk, and turned to me. "You sure?" she said. "I've been sure for 3 weeks," I said. She nodded once. "Call me when you're settled." She drove away. I had arranged for a moving company. 2 guys named Troy and Marcus, who were professional and fast and completely unfazed by the fact that a woman was removing the majority of the household furniture while her husband was at work. Or wherever he was. Troy told me he'd done 4 jobs exactly like this in the last year alone. "Women are done playing," he said, matter-of-factly, while loading a bookshelf into the truck. I said, "We really are." I took Ren's furniture first. Her crib, her dresser, the little white rocker I'd nursed her in every night for 14 months. I took the dining table, which had been mine before the marriage. I took the couch, also mine, bought with my own money before we met. I took the kitchen items I cared about and left the rest. I took the framed photos of Ren from the walls, because those were mine in a way nothing else was. I left Dominic's furniture. I left his clothes, neatly arranged in the closet. I left the espresso machine he'd bought himself for Christmas and used every single morning. I left the television. I left a note on the kitchen counter. The note said, "I've filed for divorce. You'll be hearing from Priscilla Tate. Don't contact me except through her." That was all it said. I had the locks changed at 4:30 by a locksmith named Pete, who was in and out in 40 minutes, and handed me 2 new sets of keys with the cheerful efficiency of a man who understood. He was participating in something significant, and had decided to be excellent at his job. I drove to the Plaza Midwood apartment, where Mr. Beaumont was waiting with the keys and a lease I'd already reviewed and signed. He shook my hand, told me Ren was beautiful, and left us alone. I sat on the floor of the empty living room. The movers wouldn't arrive with my furniture for another hour. With Ren in my lap, and I let myself be very quiet for a moment. Then Ren grabbed my finger in both of her hands and looked up at me with that particular expression babies have, absolute and uncomplicated trust, and I thought, okay, we're okay. Dominic's call came in at 7:53 p.m. I didn't answer. He called 4 more times in the next 20 minutes. Then he texted, "What is this? Where are you? Where is Ren?" I had Priscilla send him the formal notice that evening. She had prepared it in advance, because that is the kind of attorney she is. He called my mother. She didn't answer either. He called my friend Becca, who had known about everything for 3 weeks and had been, in her words, vibrating with the effort of not saying anything to his smug face at your birthday dinner. Becca let it go to voicemail. What I learned later, from Becca, who has mutual friends with people who know people in ways that small cities always produce, was that Dominic spent that first night attempting to reach Chelsea. Chelsea, it turned out, had very little interest in a suddenly homeless man with a pending divorce and a complicated financial situation. She had been, according to the account that filtered back to me, seeing someone else, concurrently. Dominic had apparently not been the only one with an arrangement. This information reached me about 10 days later. I was eating lunch at my desk at work, and when Becca texted it to me I sat very still for a moment and then I started laughing. The real kind, the kind that comes from somewhere deep, because the entire situation had achieved a level of absurdity that almost demanded it. He had been cheating on me with a woman who was also cheating on him. The symmetry was, honestly, something. The divorce proceedings took 4 months. They were not pleasant, but they were not as ugly as they could have been. Because Priscilla had been thorough, because the prenuptial agreement was airtight, and because... This is the part I want to be precise about. Dominic had actually cheated. This was not a suspicion. This was not a feeling. When Priscilla's team compiled the documentation, it included hotel records, the credit card statements I had photographed, cell phone location data, and a brief but sufficient statement from a hotel employee at the Meridian Suites who had encountered Dominic, and a woman matching Chelsea's description on multiple occasions and remembered them because she had, in the employee's words, seemed like someone's wife energy, but she wasn't his wife. Which is a sentence I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Dominic's attorney pushed back on the prenup. They tried several angles. They argued duress at signing. His attorney at the time had been perfectly competent and had advised him clearly, so that argument went nowhere. They argued that the infidelity documentation was insufficient. Priscilla disassembled that position methodically and without raising her voice once. They tried to argue that certain furniture I had removed was marital property. I had receipts and purchase records going back 6 years, organized in a folder I had prepared specifically for this purpose. There is something that happens in a courtroom, or rather in a mediator's office, when one side arrives with everything documented and organized, and the other side arrives having apparently not read their own prenuptial agreement recently. It's a particular kind of quiet. Like everyone in the room has done the math simultaneously. Dominic took his attorney aside twice during the mediation session. The second time, they were gone for 22 minutes. When they came back, his attorney said they were prepared to proceed under the terms of the prenuptial agreement. Priscilla looked at me. I nodded. We were done in about 45 minutes after that. I got the house. I got 60% of the joint investment accounts. I got the lump sum payment. I got primary residential custody of Ren, with Dominic receiving scheduled visitation, because whatever he had done to me, Ren deserved a father who showed up, and I was not interested in punishing my daughter to punish him. He got his 401(k), his car, and the espresso machine. He moved into a one-bedroom apartment in Ballantyne. I heard, through the same channels by which most information travels in a medium-sized city, that he attempted to see Chelsea a few times after the divorce was finalized. That those attempts were not successful. That he had begun attending a men's small group at a church near his apartment, which I genuinely hope is good for him, because I want Dominic to become a better person. Not for my sake, but for Ren's. She calls him daddy and runs to him when he picks her up for his weekends, arms out, completely undivided in her love, the way small children are when they haven't yet learned that love can be complicated. I watch that and I feel something that is not quite forgiveness and not quite peace but is moving in the direction of both. My mother came over for dinner the week everything was finalized. She sat at my new dining table, which is actually my old dining table, the one I'd had since I was 25. The one that had moved with me through 2 apartments before this house, now in the kitchen of the Plaza Midwood apartment with the backyard Ren could play in. And she poured us each a glass of wine. She said, "I'm proud of you." I said, "I learned from watching you rebuild." She set down her glass and looked at me for a long moment. "I want you to know," she said, "that I have spent 20 years wishing I'd known about prenups before I needed one." I reached across the table and took her hand. "I know," I said. "That's why I had one." There are things I want to say to anyone reading this who finds themselves in a version of what I was in. The Tuesday nights, the face-down phone, the perfume you didn't buy, and they are these. The grief is real. I want to be honest about that, because the story of a woman who leaves a cheating husband and wins everything can sound like triumph from the outside in a way that flattens how it actually feels. I cried. More than once. I cried at the espresso machine I'd left behind because some mornings the smell of it had been the first thing I'd loved about a day. I cried when I signed the divorce papers, not because I wanted to stay married to him. I didn't, but because the version of the life I'd believed I was building was gone, and grief doesn't wait for you to be done being angry before it shows up. But here is the other thing. The decision I made at that kitchen counter on a Tuesday in March, to keep slicing tomatoes, to say nothing yet, to start paying attention, was not a calculated revenge plot. It was survival. It was a woman saying to herself quietly, in the middle of an ordinary evening, "I deserve better than this, and I am going to prepare for that." Preparation is not vindictiveness, it is wisdom. My mother taught me that, inadvertently, by not having it. The prenuptial agreement wasn't pessimism about my marriage, it was respect for myself, drafted in advance. The apartment in Plaza Midwood is full of light in the mornings. Ren has figured out how to open the back door by herself, and she goes out into the fenced yard in her pajamas and stands in the grass with enormous satisfaction, surveying the territory like it's hers. It is hers. Ours. We are fine, better than fine. We are rebuilding the way my mother rebuilt, not from the rubble someone else's choice left behind, but from the foundation I had the good sense to lay before the storm. The oak trees on the old street are probably budding now. The homeowners association is probably sending letters about lawn maintenance. The espresso machine is probably making coffee for a man sitting alone at a kitchen island wondering where his life went. I think about that sometimes. Not with satisfaction, not anymore. Just with the particular clarity of someone who knows exactly what she chose, and why, and does not regret it. Ren is asleep down the hall. The apartment is quiet. It is enough.